I discussed it a lot. Hello, hello. Okay, let's go to a new episode. So, this week we will discuss the logistical bottleneck, production versus availability. Today, I want to talk about something that I think is becoming increasingly important in the coffee market, the difference between production and the real availability. We have two major Arabica origins facing logistical problems at the same time. Colombia, after the earthquake, and Brazil with port congestion. So the question is no longer only how much coffee is being produced. The question is how much coffee can actually reach the buyer. Redefine supply. When we talk about supply, we normally look at the crop numbers, but I think we need to redefine what supply actually means. You can have a very good harvest, but if you can't move that coffee efficiently, part of the supply isn't really available to the market. So today, I would look at supply as harvested coffee minus logistical friction. Having coffee available at Orange doesn't mean having coffee available to the international buyer. And I think the market is increasingly pricing deliverability, not just production. Colombia crack point. Colombia is a very clear example of this. After the 7.4 magnitude earthquake, the biggest concern isn't crop damage. The farms are largely there. The immediate problem is infrastructure. The road connecting Cali to Buenaventura, Colombia's main Pacific port, has been significantly disrupted. And even though alternative ports are available, there are transportation and truck limitations. So the cough exists, but moving it becomes much more difficult. And even after the roads reopen, it can take weeks for the logistical flow to completely normalize. What we are seeing here is that we are not talking about production crease in Colombia, but a crease of access to coffee. And then we have Brazil, but for a completely different reason. Brazil news crop is arriving. Normally, that should mean more coffee, more availability, and potentially some price pressure. But we are facing our own bottlenecks. Port congestion, container shortages, vessel chains, and additional shortage and detention costs are making export more complicated. But there is another important factor. Brazilian producers are currently in a stronger financial position. Many of them don't need to sell right away. So they are being more selective about when and at what price they sell their coffee. So even as the new crop comes in, not all of that coffee is available to the market. And that's the paradox. Brazil has a new crop coming in, but that doesn't necessarily translate into immediate availability for international buyers. So today, two of the world's largest Arabica oranges are facing supply constraints. Colombia because of excess and logistics, and Brazil because of logistics and slower producing selling. And this creates another interesting effect orange substitution. Colombia is extremely important for washed coffee, while Brazil has a very different profile, especially natural coffees. So, of course, Brazilian coffee cannot directly replace every Colombian coffee, but buyers still need to cover their needs. For blends and large programs, there is some flexibility to adjust formulations, and this could create additional demand for Brazilian fine cup coffees and consistent special plots. So, a Colombia logistical problem can indirectly create new demand for certain Brazil qualities because it could lead buyers to adjust. And here's where price become really interesting. We have two forces moving in opposite directions. Global concerns about Arabica availability can support the New York City market. At the same time, Brazil is harvesting, and the increase in physical supply can put downwards pressure on Brazilian differentials. So, Brazilian differentials can become cheaper while New York becomes more expensive. And that's important because the final FOB price is a combination of both. So, even if Brazilian differentials weaken, the final fall price may not fall as much as buyers expect. That's why simply waiting for Brazilian harvest expecting much cheaper coffee can be a risk strategy. Keep in mind, differentials can fall without the final FOB price falling. So, what we should watch from here? For me, there are four things. First, Colombia, how quickly logistics and access to Buenaventura normalize. Second, Brazil, not only how much we are producing, but how quickly the new crop actually moves into the international market. Third, Brazilian differentials. Will they weaken enough to compensate for a stronger New York market? And finally, weather. Because if you add a weather problem to a market that is already dealing with logistical uncertainty, volatility can increase very quickly. So, my takeaway is actually very simple. Don't look at how much coffee the world produces. Look at how much coffee is actually available, movable, and deliverable. Brazil's new crop should increase supply, but logistics, global Arabica availability, and the stronger New York market could keep FOB price firmer than many buyers expect. So for buyers, I think this is a market where procurement needs to be planned carefully. Waiting only because Brazil is harvest doesn't necessarily guarantee cheaper coffee. In today's market, availability may be just as important as production. Yes, thank you.